The conversation I'm having today involves bookmaking and horse racing, which is something, thankfully or otherwise, I know nothing about. But my guest in today's programme is Sean Lawless. How are you, Sean?
Nice to see you, Liam.
And this conversation essentially involves a disputed charge which dates back to 1994, so almost 19 years ago. It's a dispute in which you, as an individual bookmaker, Sean, got involved with the supplier of a service. And the dispute at the time was about 444 punts a year, which you disputed. And as a result of that dispute, you lost your business. And yet, almost 20 years later, the disputed charge, which you believed then, as you still believe now, was fraudulent. If you look at that charge as applied to all the bookmakers in Great Britain and Ireland, some 9,000 of them, the actual overcharge which you claim to be there is in the region of 200 million. So today's conversation actually is not about a small thing, it's about something which could run into 200 million. And it involves yet again the struggle of an individual person against a powerful conglomerate. So just to start, Sean, just introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you from?
I'm Sean Lawless. I'm from Dundalk. I backed my first horse when I was 14 years of age. I've been backing horses ever since. I became a bookmaker when I was about 24. And
what age are you, Sean?
70.
All right. So, and I suppose the important thing is when you just said your location, Dundalk is on the border between Southern Ireland and Northern Ireland, and its relevance might come part of the conversation insofar as the laws about betting, etc. Just to say, again, my interest, I know nothing about horse racing or bookmaking or whatever, but it's a border reality essentially. So just, the other thing is, when we were speaking, you gave me some history about bookmaking itself, and there was a date, 1962, that comes to mind. Do you want to tell me what's relevant before then and after? What happened before then? What was the art or the business of bookmaking like?
Well, the business of bookmaking in Ireland was legal in Ireland by virtue of applying for a licence and suitability of the premises used for bookmaking. In the UK it was different. It wasn't legalised until 1962. Prior to that,
so just come back to, in the early days, before the legality of bookmaking premises, how did people make bets and all that?
Well, in the UK, I wouldn't have a recollection of it not being in existence, betting not being regulated in Ireland, but certainly in the UK, the runner who stood on the corner of the street accepted bets from the public, took those bets to a bookmaker, and returned the following day to make payments in return.
So it's very much an under-the-table business until 1962. So in 1962 it was legalised in England, and essentially then, can I say, bookies' offices could be seen on the main street just like a normal business?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. And after that...
Actually, it's worth saying, it's worth adding that from a Monopolies and Mergers Commission report, there were 16,000 permit holders, individuals in the UK, holding a permit for one or more offices
in
1962 onwards.
Oh, right, okay. So
that many emerged from behind closed doors as well.
Right. Well, I suppose that's something I thought about is, they talk about the oldest professions in the world being prostitution and soliciting. That's lawyers. But I presume gambling has been around since day one as well. Isn't that right?
Yes.
So it's not. But anyway, since then it was legalised. And the next thing that really is relevant here is the development of a service called Xtel. Do you want to tell us what that is, or what that was and when it came in?
Yes, Xtel was an independent company. When I say independent, I mean independent of all bookmakers. It began delivering through telecommunication systems audio information and audio information on horse racing.
So this was live
Through the betting
racing
shops.
beamed into audio,
Audio.
right, like radio, and it actually came in, I think, through a telephone signal. Is that right?
Yes.
So it was beamed basically into individual premises,
Yes.
where you could therefore hear the race going on and you could bet live racing on it.
Yes.
Right. So and that was provided. That's the company Extel, and they came into operation at what period of time?
Well, I in 62.
All right, okay. So that was in the
Legitimately
early
doing
days
races.
of betting on horse racing.
That's
In a bookie's office. It was done through radio signal only.
That's right.
I mean, obviously, we're in 2013. We have a different expectation of how we experience things. So the arrival of video feed, live video racing into bookies' offices emerged with this company that you ended up in dispute with. This is
Yes, SIS in 1986, 87, well, 87 actually.
so in 87, and again, just the company SIS stands for.
Satellite Information Services.
All right, so satellite information services essentially were the latest product essentially to challenge radio, and they ultimately would have just replaced radio, because once you could get a video signal coming into your shop, who'd want to listen to radio?
Yes.
Is that right? So SAS came into operation in 1987. Am I right to say they operated through Great Britain and Ireland? Would that be
Yes.
right? And the other thing is just to place it immediately, were they the only service provider of this type of service? Could I choose from number of 10 different providers provide me live racing?
No, this was the only provider.
So they're a single sole monopolistic operator in this space.
Yes.
Right. And so they offered this service, and you at the time, just going back to how you got into bookmaking, around what time did you open your shops or whatever?
Well, I was in bookmaking before the existence of SIS. I was taking the Extel service in one or two shops that I had at that time. And the introduction of the idea of pictures into betting shops was beginning to evolve at that time, around 1985, 86. And it came to a head with the company of SIS being formed by four of the more or less leading bookmaker shops in the UK: Ladbrokes, Hills, Corals and Mecca.
And these four groups, these are companies who would have a number of shops on their books.
A number of
Is that
shops,
right? Okay, so they were basically the power brokers in that conversation. Just to ask you again, what the bookies, your offices were in 1986 or whatever, what sort of events are we talking about people betting on? Is it purely horse racing?
Simply horse racing.
Or so what about other sports?
There were no other sports in Extel's time.
In Extel, so they were delivering only horse racing?
Yes, until the introduction of greyhound racing by Bags, Bookmakers Afternoon Greyhound Services Limited, which also was made up by or created by Ladbrokes, Hills, Corals.
And when did this? So it's just to get these names are important. SIS is Satellite Information Systems. That's one company. We have another company called Bags, which is Bookmakers
Afternoon Greyhound Services.
Afternoon Greyhound Services, which were also basically established by this central power group. That's again, the groups are Ladbrokes,
Corals,
Corals, Hills,
and Mecca in relation to SIS, but not in relation to Bags.
So Bags essentially covers greyhound racing.
Yes.
All right. And you're saying this came as part of the original Excel process, is that correct?
Not the original, it was...
before Excel essentially were replaced by SIS,
that's
we were getting greyhound racing and horse racing piped into bookies' offices.
Not all bookmakers' offices, because the facility of telecommunication provision didn't allow some offices in some areas
to
of
get
the UK
both signals or both services.
Yes,
Now, just a sense, is there a difference between betting on horses and betting on greyhounds in terms of the percentage of people who bet on horses and greyhounds? Is it equal 50-50 or is it
No,
business?
it's been established that with the introduction of greyhound racing into betting shops through Extel initially, paid for by Bags, the percentage of betting on greyhounds was 10% of the turnover in a betting shop.
And as we've discussed, one of the things, am I right in saying that essentially the rationale for taking greyhound racing into a traditional bookie's office wasn't so much that it was business, because it was only 10% of the business, but it was for fillers in between live horse racing.
Exactly,
Is that
yes.
what made sense
Yes,
in it, is it?
yes.
Because otherwise customers would hardly be sitting around, you know, for a half an hour waiting for the next race that might last 3 or 4 minutes unless there was something to fill in. And that's what made
Yes.
sense of it, is that right?
That's what the
But
sense-
from you as a bookmaker's point of view, was greyhound racing an important element of your business, or was it?
No, absolutely not. I mean, no, it wasn't.
Right.
Anybody who was coming in to bet would bet on horses. They didn't need an alternative. And
in terms of, say, the payment, you obviously paid Xtel for the service that came in originally.
yes,
And what about the horse racing component and this new component, say, that they added in bags? I mean, who paid for that? Did Bags pay Xtel? Did Xtel pay Bags?
Bags paid Xtel.
So Bags wanted to deliver their service into an office, and they said, look, will you carry our signal and we'll pay you to carry our signal. How did Bags get their money back?
They sought voluntary subscriptions from any bookmakers who wanted their service.
So why would a bookie pay for Bags?
Well, there would be no reason for a bookmaker to pay for Bags.
Any bookmaker?
Any bookmaker. Except the only people who wanted Bags in the service with Xtel were the chain bookmakers who had the bigger turnover shops, and therefore the bigger opportunity of making a profit out of this.
So
extra.
they would have had an interest in greyhound racing. Okay, so that's the situation up to 1987. Then we get video signal piped into your bookie's office. Now again, comparing that to the modern era of 2013, where it seems to me we can look at sports, all sorts of sports on all sorts of TV channels. I understand in this situation, back in the day, the only way you could ever see that live racing is through a bookie's office who had a contract with SIS.
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that if you weren't getting a live TV signal into your offices, you weren't in business?
Oh, you certainly weren't in business.
That was the only way, essentially, to make
just to correct,
bookmaking work.
The terrestrial television channels were doing the occasional Saturday transmission of live transmission of racing into nationally. Everybody got it. It was got on your television, under your television license.
But that was only
part of that. It was part of the BBC or UTV's program.
Right, but that
would only be into
you couldn't run a
domestic
bookie
homes.
business based on what was coming in on your ordinary TV. All right.
No,
So
they'd only
what I'm saying is,
before-
it was the lifeblood of your business.
Yes.
Was to be able to get that signal, and that's the
Yes.
important thing I'm trying to establish. Now, the other thing is, when they moved from audio signals to a video signal, was there much of a cost differential? Did the cost change much?
Oh, massively. The cost was probably 20 times what the cost was for the audio to Xtel.
Right, and just what would have happened to the Xtel business? Like these two now in competition, with video and radio, or audio in competition, I presume the audio just burned off, disappeared, did it?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, once you had video, no one was going to go
yeah.
to the shop with the radio. So you became a customer of this SIS, Satellite Information Systems service. Is that you
Yes.
bought into that service?
Yes.
And I presume you were delighted to buy because it gave your business opportunities.
Well, yes, it gave you a certain amount of certainty. Xtel didn't appear to be wanting to invest in this new live picture phenomenon, and bookmakers, or the chain bookmakers who were trying to persuade other bookmakers, smaller bookmakers, into joining SIS were given a guarantee to SIS that they would have shared, or to independent bookmakers, that they would have shares. They would be given shares in the.
So it was an attractive proposition. And were you an early adopter?
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
you were a happy customer? Happy to pay?
Yes,
Good
yes.
paying customer?
Good paying customer,
Right.
yes.
And it just give me some idea around.
Well, sorry, if I may interject there, you couldn't be anything else but a good paying customer with SIS, because the extraordinary thing about SIS was, as a monopoly provider of a vital service to bookmakers, you must pay in advance. You actually had to pay in advance for the service you would get.
A year in advance, or?
Well, it began as 3 months in advance and then reduced to a month in advance.
Right, but you were always in credit, essentially.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Otherwise you were cut off.
Otherwise you were cut off, or the threat had been cut off.
Right, and so essentially you signed on with SIS shortly after they started around 1987?
Yes.
Right, and
well, you
so
signed on. All bookmakers who were going to take the service signed on an interim contract, and paid for 3 months in advance on that interim contract before they got a full contract and the service was rolled out. At whatever time after that, the service might be rolled out.
Right, so it was rolled out incrementally throughout Great
Yes.
Britain and Ireland. So you were with them for a number of years, you were paying your bills, you were a good customer. Is that correct, is it?
Yes.
Right. And then I'm trying to get to the point of the dispute. So at what time, what period of time did it start from?
Well, the dispute arose on notice from SIS that they had entered into a rights agreement with Bags, Bookmakers Afternoon Greyhound Services Limited, which would require an increase of £444 per year.
When did this?
And it was due to come in, they had sent the notice out in December.
December when? What year?
December 1993.
All right, so in December 1993, SIS then wrote to their customers saying, look, we've a change in our system. We're now going to start charging you for this bags to greyhound race. We're going to start providing you with greyhound racing services, and we're going to charge you. Is that correct?
Sorry. They were always, from 87, from the sign-up time in 87, horse racing and greyhound racing being bags, was delivered in their service to all bet shops as part of the contract between the individuals.
All right, so when you signed up with SIS for a service, the service that you were getting from them involved horse racing and the bag service of greyhound racing.
That's correct.
And did you pay an individual, did you pay a separate amount for horse racing and for greyhound racing, or just a fixed sum?
You just pay the fixed fee.
And you had this for a number of years, from 1988 or 87 to 1990. You had been 4 or 5 years getting this service.
Yes.
And now in December 1993, SIS are telling you you want us to pay a separate amount for bags.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And sorry, am I right? Is this what the dispute? Is that the essence of your dispute?
That is the essence of the dispute.
So maybe just spell out what you regard the essence as being.
The request for this rights agreement, and it must be kept in mind that these were common directors in SIS and Bags. The common ownership of SIS and Bags is the chain bookmakers. We were in accordance with the terms of the contract that I signed in 1990, anything that SIS delivered into my office was covered by the existing service fee. So this was a new charge. They were allowed to increase their service fee year on year based on the retail price index.
Sorry, are you saying to me, in your contract there was a clause which allowed them to have a generalised increase on a year-to-year basis based on retail price index or consumer price index changes? That was the only area.
That was
now,
the only area.
you showed me some contracts there about what was defined as the service, isn't that right? And
yes, the service was defined as the fax service.
all right, so that's the word, what we mean, because this word, we've talked about SIS, which is Satellite Information Systems. We talked about Bags being bookmakers, afternoon greyhound service, and now we have a new thing called FACTS,
yes.
FACTS. So
yes,
just
the
FACTS
service was the service that all bookmakers signed up to. That was the primary service that SIS were delivering. And it was defined as the daily news service provided by SIS and currently known as full audio and caption televised services.
Full audio, captions and televised services. That's what the FACTS word comes from. Right.
FACTS. Composing A, audio, and B, captions for race meetings and other sporting events scheduled for the relevant day and covered by SIS, and live television coverage of
Let me
selected
see
race
that.
meetings taking place.
So this
on
is
such
from your this is the definition section from your contract that you signed, and it said here, audio and captions for race meetings and other sporting events scheduled for the relevant day. So that, and covered by SIS. And this is the definition. This is what facts actually means. Now, just clarify here: race meetings and other sporting events covered by SIS. What does that mean? Race meetings and other sporting events. Back in 1990, whatever. What other sporting events were covered? What events were covered? You had race meetings. I presume that's horse racing, is it?
Horse racing.
And so, what other sports?
Greyhound racing.
And then what about other sports?
That's it.
I mean, obviously now we can bet on all sorts of things.
Yes. In those days, no. Horse racing and greyhound.
So the only two things that could have been involved, this is the race meetings and sporting events covered by SIS could only have meant horse racing and greyhound racing. Okay, so and that's from your original contract that we've read there. So anyway, in 1993, they wanted to modify their charge to you, and they wanted to increase your charge by a separate amount. And this is where there's 440 punts. And remember, we're in punts terms here. This is probably in the region of €550 at this stage. So they wanted 440 for punts extra every year, on top of your yearly fee. I think you said to me at the time earlier, you pointed it was 4,800 punts.
Yes.
So 4,800 punts, this is back in 1993, just to give us some context. And essentially they're looking for another 10%, which is interesting when I think about the breakdown of horse racing and greyhound race as 90-10. So they're looking for this extra charge from you. And they mentioned this in 1993. When were they going to implement it?
Initially January, but there was objections to them introducing it in January because the contract required that any increases must be advised 3 months in advance.
Right. And just a question, had they the right to unilaterally change contract conditions like this?
No.
And
the particular reference that I made to the contract to them was any amendment or variation hereto must be in writing and signed by both parties.
so that's again, you're just showing me the original
That is-
contract you signed there. All right, so this is about the section 14, law and extent of contract, and it says, you see it's underlined here, any amendment or a variation hereto must be in writing and signed by both parties. So your understanding of this is that for this contract to be changed, is your argument that it was a fundamental change to the contract?
Yes, this was a fundamental. Well, it was in breach of a number of sections within the contract.
Right.
The section relating to increases not being above the rate of the retail price index, and the final term of law and extent of contract. Any amendment must be
should have been said. So that was your understanding that this couldn't happen unless you both agreed on it.
Yes.
So you, this is want to get around it. This is you disputed their interpretation. Am I
Yes.
right in saying that your contention was that you were already paying for the delivery of horse and greyhound racing to you? That's the service that right. But separately, Bags, who were delivering their service through SIS, their greyhound service, they were seeking that bookies made voluntary contributions to them. They've always done that. They invoiced.
Yes.
Did they invoice you?
Yes, they invoiced bookmakers with a term included in the invoice. If you're using this, if you're using this service, if you're using the bag service, please pay this account promptly.
Right.
It wasn't the kind of invoice you would expect from a company that you had signed up to.
Had you ever signed up to a
No,
contract
there was
with Bags?
No, there was never any contract.
So
at
this
any
is
time.
a service that's been sent in your door that you
Yes.
can't turn off. Is that right?
Yes.
You know, you can't separate them out.
No.
You couldn't separate them at
No.
your end. You couldn't say, well, I just want to take that part of the option. It was bundled together,
Yes.
and that's what came into the door. But you didn't ask for this to be bundled. But you're saying to me that from the outset, that was what you paid for, and it was always bundled in there.
Yes.
Right. So anyway, you disputed this payment. Can you just tell me a little bit about the process by which you disputed it and what happened as a result of it?
Well, I immediately wrote to SIS directly and referred them to the terms of the contract. First of all, that they couldn't amend it without both parties signing up to it. I pointed out to them that that increase was of 10% for bags was in greater than the retail price index, and in addition to that, I drew to their attention that the fax service included horse racing and greyhound racing that I had signed up to. That was what they were delivering to me, and as far as I was concerned, the cost of both greyhound racing and horse racing was costed within their service fee from the inception of SIS. And I then asked them to give me a breakdown of what the cost of horse racing and greyhound racing was, to separate the cost of horse racing and greyhound racing within my contract and tell me which was the cost for each of those two services.
So just to clarify, you asked at that point the question, what's the breakdown in the bundle that you're providing for me in terms of how much of the bundle is attributed to horse racing, how much is attributed to greyhound racing?
Yes.
And did you get an answer to that?
No.
That's back in 1994, I presume, is that right?
That's back in early 1994.
And just to this day, do you have clarity or an answer to that?
No.
So you're saying you've never been told, SAS have never expressly responded and defined what is the breakdown between horse racing and greyhound racing in terms of the charge,
Yeah,
even in percentage terms?
From its inception.
Right. Now, you mentioned to me about the contract you signed, and did you and others sign the same contract, or did everybody get the same contract?
Well, apparently there were two different contracts. This only came to light during the discovery period in the process.
Okay,
However,
well maybe
just
we'll leave that until we come round to before getting into discovery.
It might be simpler to answer your question by saying, ostensibly, everybody who signed the contract thought they were signing the same contract.
Right, so you weren't, what I'm saying, they weren't selling different contracts for different people.
No,
everybody was getting the same,
everybody was getting
understood
the same
them to be getting the same
Yes.
package. So you disagreed with them. They didn't respond to your question. What happened next? I mean, did you agree to pay the money? Did you not pay? What happened?
There were a number of exchanges between us, but they still refused to give me the breakdown of the service fee costed by them when they started the service.
Right.
They then threatened that I owed them 400 and something about £400, something
Sorry,
around £400
so they
over
were
a period.
looking for you to pay
Yeah.
this sum of money, which was in
Yes.
dispute. Okay, so
Yes.
at some point in time, and can I just say, did you seek legal advice in relation to this, or were you just acting alone on your own?
No, I was simply acting alone on the basis of good faith between
Right.
themselves, because I felt that that they should understand the contract, that the contract was the same for us both. They couldn't have interpreted any differently than me. That the fax service contained horse racing and greyhound racing, and the fee for the fax service was for whatever day the SIS delivered into the betting shops on a day-to-day basis.
And you expected, what did you expect them to do once you clarified this with them? Did you ever expect to be cut off, for example, or?
Oh, absolutely, never expected
Right.
it. That was the last thing I expected.
What
to be.
did you go to anybody about this besides directly go to SIS?
No. Initially, no, I didn't until after I was cut off. But the sequence of events was that SIS, the build-up was that they weren't answering my questions. I wasn't paying them.
No, so just to clarify, you weren't paying them. There's two elements to the payment here.
Yes.
There's the 4,800 basic, that's the service you were getting.
Yes.
Did you stop paying that?
No, that
so
was
you kept
always
paying the money that you've always paid.
Yes.
And then this extra €440, you disputed that. Is that
Yes.
right? But you didn't ever fail to pay the original sum?
No.
Or the basic sum? Okay. So you weren't paying them this extra disputed sum. So what happened
they wrote me, ultimately they wrote me and said, if you don't pay this,
All
of this, we will issue legal proceedings against you for it.
Right.
I replied that I was agreeable to put the money on joint deposit.
This
with
is the
them.
dispute, just to be
This
clear
is
for
the
our listeners.
disputed.
So you were going to continue paying your 4,800 a year, and this disputed 444 pounds, you were going to do what with
put
it?
it on joint deposit with them until the
Until-
matter was decided by either arbitration or their threat to take me to court. If they had taken me to court and it was established that I owed them,
You'd pay your money, and in the meantime, the money would be held in a safe account.
Absolutely.
So that was your putting forward your good
Yes.
faith. Is that right? Now, did they accept this, or
no.
so? What did they do?
Within days, they just cut it off. Cut
When?
off the
So
service.
when did they cut you off?
Probably a week after that correspondence.
When was this?
Or the 14th of November 1994.
Right. So I want to capitalize that date. What age were you at that stage, Sean?
52.
So you're 52 years of age. What are your
Well, I was married to Mary. I'm still married to Mary. And Mary was a housewife, rearing 5 kids.
So you're a family man with kids, your mortgage,
No,
You're-
I had no mortgage at the time.
you're running your business, so you've got the costs of running a family. I'm trying to capture this because I've already clarified what happens to your business when the live feed going into your office stops. What happens to a bookie's business?
Just close it down.
I mean, is it, again, I know nothing about racing, but I would presume if I want to bet in a race and I go in here and there's no picture means I'm gone. And I presume there's no such thing as loyalty. If I don't
No.
bet there, I go somewhere else. Is that
No.
right? So, like, in a minute, it's like turning off your oxygen. Am I right in saying that?
That's right. Actually, the chairman of SIS, John Morgan, at a meeting I attended, described SIS as the equivalent of blood to a hospital. The racing's equivalent.
Of blood to a
Bookmakers.
hospital. So even the
Bookmakers
providers, yeah, just repeat that. John Morgan, who's the
John
chairman
Morgan,
of SIS.
who was chairman
Right.
of SIS at that time, described at a meeting that the service provided by SIS to bookmakers was nearly as essential as blood to a hospital.
Right. So suddenly, you've said to me you didn't expect this to happen. All of a sudden, you're cut off. So it's a big axe. And who did you turn to then? What did you do?
Well,
I mean, the obvious thing to do is just pay up and be a good boy. Did you want to do that, or
no,
why didn't you do
no,
that?
I wouldn't. I wasn't facilitating what I believed to be an unlawful charge. I just simply wasn't facilitating it.
Is this on a matter of principle, or?
Well, it's on a matter of principle, but if you do, you eventually, it's a leverage to get more and more and more and more. If you
And
believe
also,
something
did
to be
you
an unlawful
see
charge-
this as that black and white, that they're doing something wrong and I can prove it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is black and white.
You must have believed what you were doing to.
Well, the one thing that would make it black and white is with the breakdown of the service fee costed by them when they started the service.
Notice when you were paying, when the service was there from 1987 to 1993 or 94, they were already providing horse racing and greyhound racing. If somebody had said to you, what was the initial breakdown of this bundle,
Yes.
there would have been clarity, and that wasn't clarified
No.
at the time, nor never has been
And
since.
never has been, or never has been to anyone.
Okay, now you moved on. So what did you do then? You're on your own. If suddenly after cutting you off, presume if it was me, I'd be worried, how am I going to survive? Just who did you turn to? What
I
did
went
you do?
to the IIBOA, the Irish Independent Bookmakers Association.
You were a
which I
member
was
of this,
a
were you?
council member, yes.
Council member, okay.
Um,
And what did they do? Or
The CEO, Brian O'Farrell, rang SIS telling them that on principle I was not going to pay this charge. I was agreeable to put it on joint deposit with them, as was recorded in correspondence to them. They apparently said to him, if he doesn't pay, we'll cut him off.
right. So the Independent Bookmakers Association, that group, made representations on your behalf, and SIS weren't interested. You had to
Yes.
pay up. So they were holding a hard line. That was their
Yes.
company strategy. So at some point then, you obviously took legal advice. Is that right?
I went to McCann Fitzgerald,
So again, McCann Fitzgerald, big organisation,
very big organisation, yes,
big solicitors firm.
leading firm of solicitors with offices in Belfast, New York, London.
All right, so they're a multinational presence. Can I just say that, why did you go to them? Somebody recommend you?
No, I just went to them because I wanted the matter dealt with as imminently as possible. And I thought that the biggest firm around.
Best service, biggest firm. That's
Yes.
your belief system. Okay, so now can I ask you, had your previous experience with legal?
No,
Had you been in courts
no,
before?
no.
Was this a new area for you, was it?
Well, it was, more or
Right.
less, yes.
As it is, I think, for most people. I mean, I think the vast majority of people might have dealt with a solicitor, possibly in terms of buying a house, or maybe at some stage a speeding fine or something like that. But that's about the most experience, most exposure, most ordinary citizens would have to the court. So you retained McCann Fitzgerald as a paying customer. You were a
Yes.
paying customer. That was the professional relationship from the
Yes.
outset. They provide a service, you pay.
I
Is that
paid.
right? So you asked them to represent you in this case, and what happened?
They entered into correspondence with SIS.
Just to say, when did you initially engage them?
I think the first letter they wrote was in December 1994.
So you engaged them in December 1994, and just to say, when did you end your relationship with them?
In October 1999.
So you were engaged. You engaged McCann Fitzgerald to represent your interests for almost 5 years.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to get a handle on an issue which it seems to me is a clear issue of what will you charge for each service, and are they in breach of their contract? There's no other elements, side elements to this case here, is there?
None.
Okay. So there was correspondence forward and back from McCann Fitzgerald. What was the nature of this, or what was the outcome of it?
Well, the outcome of it was that the correspondence lasted quite a considerable time. Was lasting quite a considerable time. I was now finding myself in difficulty with no income, so I contacted McCann Fitzgerald and I asked them to bring the matter into the district court in Dundalk, have the matter adjudicated, upon which in the district court you would have it in 3 or 4 months, have the matter adjudicated on. The worst case scenario is that they would be able to appeal it to the circuit court, which would still be short-term process, but at least I would get an established adjudication on it.
So this is important, it seemed to me, as to where we're going with this. This idea of an adjudication. You wanted an independent judicial investor looking at this and a clarified judgment. Either I'm right and they're in breach of contract, or they're right and I'll pay them the money.
Absolutely.
And if they had been proven right, if they had been adjudicated and proven right, would you have been happy to pay the money?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, were you trying to get out of bookmaking, or were you keen to be in this?
No. The last place, I've been involved in betting for 56
So
years.
it's not just a job for you.
No,
Is that
it
what you're
wasn't a
saying? It's a
job.
whole culture, it's a community, or how you communicate with the world is through that conversation. For me, I know nothing about horse, but the community, the people, and what engages you and interests you and all the rest is centred around
Yes.
bookmaking, horses, etc.
Yes.
So, okay. Now, so you asked McCann Fitzgerald to take it into the district court, or if it was an appeal into the circuit court, because you get a fairly instantaneous, when I say in law, you'd expect something to be over and done within a year.
Yes, I must add to that was that not only was that request made by me, but it was also made by Brian O'Farrell of the
Bookmakers Association.
Bookmakers Association. On the following day, I think I rang them on the 30th of the 1st of June, and he rang them on the 2nd of June, telling them that it's essential that Sean gets this matter dealt with in the district court.
So what did McCann Fitzgerald do? Did they, for example, seek an injunction initially when you engage with McCann Fitzgerald, did they say, well, look, let's just get this man back in business again, because this is his lifeblood, switch him on again, and we'll deal with the dispute. The reason I'm saying that to you at the moment, just in the last day or two, there's been a bus strike in Ireland. And obviously, once the buses stop, then people can't get to work. But what has been done by both sides is they've gone into negotiation, and the strikers have lifted their strike ban for the moment while holding that threat. But they're in conversation. But while the conversation is going on, the buses are still running.
Yes.
So was that ever a suggestion that your legal team would ask for an injunction in a court to try and get you back up and running, so you wouldn't lose your clients essentially?
No, it was never. It was never. Well, it was made as the comment. The only comment statement made on it was that I wouldn't get an injunction. Now I thought myself that even if
but did you discuss that?
It was discussed. It was discussed.
No, sorry, I just interrupt you. Was that prior to you seeking to go into the courts, into the district court?
Yes.
Or so that was one of the initial things, conversations you would have had with them, right? And did you ask them about that?
Well, I didn't know anything. I was expecting them to tell me what the
mechanism. So how did this injunction conversation come up?
I'm not quite sure now how it was mentioned. They had asked me to pay it.
Right.
McCann Fitzgerald asked me to pay it, and I said no, I wasn't going to facilitate. I wasn't going to. I think
Sorry, when they asked you to pay it, how do you mean pay it if you're still going to dispute it?
Well, to pay it.
And just walk away, is that what
just
you're
walk
saying?
away.
That was their legal advice?
Well, it wasn't legal advice. If you want to stay in business, it seemed to me that they were saying you can't have it both ways. If you want to stay in business, you pay the charge.
Right.
If you want to challenge the charge, and they won't let you stay in business, then those are the two options you had.
Right.
They simply said that we believed that you wouldn't get it.
Wouldn't get what? So?
An injunction. You wouldn't succeed in an injunction.
All right. Okay. And just to say to you, I mean, I'm just saying, if an injunction had been granted against SIS, which would have meant that they continued to provide you the service while it was in dispute, would that have cost SIS? Would they have lost as a result of reconnecting you?
No, actually, they would have gained, because they would have been getting the £484 per year that I was paying them.
The 4,800.
Yeah, 4,000.
Oh, so in other words, it was a bit like cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Absolutely.
In both directions.
Yes.
No, but in both, you obviously decided not to pay, and you lost your business.
Yes.
They decided not to keep providing you, so they also lost 4,800.
Yeah.
As well as this disputed whereas what you're saying is, if an injunction had been provided, they would have continued to get their 4,800, 90% essentially of their what they were looking for,
yes.
And the other 10% would have been a dispute, and yet, this wasn't a solution. So, the district court. Did you go to the district court?
Just to add, no, it didn't go to the district court.
Well, why not? You asked McCann Fitzgerald to go to the district court.
McCann Fitzgerald then asked Ian Finlay, the senior counsel, to give a written opinion, to create a written opinion, look at the
about the legitimacy of your case.
Yeah, about the legitimacy of my case. He provided that.
So Ian Finlay is a senior counsel.
Yes.
Retained by McCann Fitzgerald on your behalf, right?
Yes.
Did you have a junior counsel?
Yes, Mr. Mark Sanfey.
Okay. And Ian Finlay produced a legal opinion?
Yes.
Okay, and you have that in front of you?
May the 13th, 1996.
Okay, and is there some element of that which
is
definitive?
In the opinion, he said, in these circumstances, SIS, in connecting the service, were acting in breach of contract.
In disconnecting, sorry, is it? Hold on.
No, sorry, my apologies. In these circumstances, SIS, in disconnecting the service, were acting in breach of contract. Furthermore, that breach was a fundamental breach.
Just show me that there, Sean. All right, so this is on page 5 of that document. It says, in these circumstances, SIS, in disconnecting the service, were acting in breach of contract. Furthermore, that breach was a fundamental breach. Now, this is the legal opinion of a senior counsel who had examined your case, examined your contract, and in his opinion, on the 13th of May 1996, he was saying that there was a fundamental breach of contract. So presumably you must have been heartened by the fact that a senior counsel had looked at this, who experienced senior counsel with a seriously major firm called McCann Fitzgerald, and said, you have a solid case here of fundamental breach of contract. So what was the direction that it took after that?
At a consultation, I was advised that this matter needed to be dealt with. I remember the term needed to be dealt with in the High Court.
As against this?
As against my desire
to go into the district court.
To go to the district court and get it.
Right, okay. So the advice was we need to go to the High Court, and so what was done about that?
Well, the process of discovery was entered into. It was...
But was there a case, a claim filed or?
Yes, there was the accountants, Jim Rogers, prepared a claim. Well, there was a statement of claim prepared.
So the statement of claim is what would have been prepared by your solicitor,
team.
right?
Yes.
And the statement of claim, what were you claiming?
They were claiming under the four headings: 1, breach of contract; 2, breach of duty; 3, negligence; and 4, abuse of a dominant position.
So there are 4 elements to the case that you were filing against SIS. In what year?
In 1997.
In 1997, you were filing a claim on the basis of 4 things. 1 was a breach of contract, 2 was a breach of duty, 3 was negligence, and finally there was abuse of a dominant position.
Yes.
Right. And so this claim was filed in 1997. So what happened between then and briefly between then and 1999?
Well, the process of discovery continued.
So just to explain to our listeners, discovery is you go to court and
both sides present any documents relevant to the dispute.
Right. So in other words, that you have a right to that the other side, SIS, would deliver to you documents, including, for example, their own internal documents involved with this issue, and they would make them available to you, and similarly you would make your documents available to the other side.
That's correct.
And this process goes on through notices of motion or whatever, is it?
Yes. It's
right. So I'm just, again, listeners might be saying, why are we taking so long to find out what all of these things? You know, there's numbers of years going on here, and even me, I'm frustrated thinking about this, the length of time. I mean, there's a clear question. You asked for a breakdown of costs between a bundle of horse racing and greyhound racing. What percentage are you charging for each, or were you charging for each made in 1987? That's the first thing.
Yes.
And you've now put together a claim based on advice from a senior counsel from a highly reputable multinational firm, McCann Fitzgerald, or a firm with multinational presence in different countries. And we're in 1980, 97, 98. So where do we get to around 1999?
In 1999...
Did you end up going to court with this?
No. In 1999, McCann Fitzgerald then said that they were... In 1999, McCann Fitzgerald brought me into a consultation and told me that they had gotten an offer from SIS of £80,000 clear to me.
That's excluding cost.
That's excluding
So
cost.
you'll be made to do what? To settle?
To settle.
Right. So you're given an offer to settle this case for 80,000 back in, say, 1999, right?
Yes.
Excluding costs. Just to say to you, at the time, you were paying McCann Fitzgerald. What sort of monies had you expended in McCann Fitzgerald?
In and around £20,000.
So you'd pay them 20,000 to do a job. It's not.
Yeah.
They're not doing this on a no-fault, no-fee basis.
No.
They're doing it for a professional sum of money
Yes.
for that period of time. They now come, they're giving you an offer of 80,000 if you walk away from this. Did you accept it?
No, no.
Why didn't you accept it, John?
No, I wanted an adjudication. I simply wanted an adjudication.
So this is the second time, I'm just going to say, this is the second time you've mentioned from the very start, you said you wanted somebody to adjudicate on this. You wanted to know what the answer was, right or wrong.
Yes.
So the money didn't make you walk away from this. So what happened between you and McCann Fitzgerald as a result of this?
we parted ways. They wouldn't take it forward.
They said, look, if we don't want to be. There's no point in us doing this. Why wouldn't they want to have progress this, Sean?
Well, I mean, I really didn't understand. I don't understand enough about the process. My understanding now is that they had no right to walk away from it, that they were hired on a fee and that they had taken it this far and that they had an obligation to me to take it to its conclusion, to follow my instruction.
Right.
To take it to its conclusion. But they simply wouldn't take it to its conclusion. They wanted me to settle.
Right.
For the £80,000 off. £80,000.
Was there a weakness in your case? I mean, you showed me the legal argument, which says that the opinion of the senior counsel was that it was a fundamental breach of contract. Presumably, what you were going to be looking for is damages. Was there a weakness?
Well, they claimed that there was a damages in the weakness, that there wasn't sufficient proper documentation to meet the...
documentation of what?
Well, accounts.
Now, just to clarify, the accounts are the accounts of your business, is that right?
Yes.
Like, obviously, if you're going to seek damages, you have to set out what the damage, the loss to you of your livelihood over the last 5 years.
Yes.
And why would there be a difficulty in accounting for that?
Well, there was a difficulty in accounting for it because part of my business and the use of the SIS service was betting, professional betting myself.
Right, so this is you were two elements of your livelihood, in a sense.
Yes.
Once you were a professional punter, in a sense yourself, and you were also a bookmaker.
Yes.
Is that normal in bookmaking?
No, I wouldn't call it normal, but it does happen. There are some
people do it. Not every bookmaker does. That's right. Yes. And again, at the very start of this conversation, I mentioned that you were living in Dundalk on the border. Am I right in saying that the accounting of monies moving in and out of bookmakers, and particularly at that time in the border in Ireland, given that there had been a different legal situation in the past about betting in the north and in the south in relation to tax, did that make the nature of accounting and bookmaking business complicated? Or
it did make it complicated, but not necessarily for me, because the kind of business that I was doing, the title of my office was the Silver Ring, which suggested to anybody betting that not to be coming in with very large bets.
Right.
So I wasn't doing very large bets, accepting very large bets. So the kind of turnover I had in my betting shop was smallish to make it a very big profit. But the profit that I got was from the betting, my own betting.
Right.
My own backing.
So just to say, presumably what you're saying is your own legal team are saying, look, we've got a cast iron case here, but in case of the sum of damages involved, it's hard to establish that because of the accountancy nature or accounting and whatever in your bookie business. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So,
however, I made the point to them that I wasn't particularly interested. All I was wanting was an adjudication.
Right.
I wasn't particularly interested in money.
Right. So the essential thing was you wanted an answer, were they in breach of contract or not? The sum of money was a separate and less important issue. So you parted ways with McCann Fitzgerald. Did that mean you just gave up going to court, or what happened next?
No, I actually started going into court myself.
Right.
As a litigate.
And is this continuing the process of discovery, or is this further?
No, the discovery was finished at that stage. All matters were finished at that stage. The discovery was almost finished. There was very little in terms of discovery to be done. There was documentation which would have, having read them, would have implied that there was other documentation to follow from that.
Which hadn't been provided.
Which hadn't been provided.
So you went into court, did you?
I went into court myself and went before Justice Budd asking...
So Justice Budd in the High Court?
In the High Court. I asked, drafted a notice of motion, went into the High Court in front of Justice Budd.
In Dublin, I presume.
In Dublin.
Right.
And Justice Budd explained to me that what I was asking for, which was a breakdown of the service fee costed by SIS in 1987 when they created the fax service of horse racing and greyhound racing. I simply wanted a breakdown of those two elements in the service from SIS. And Mr. Budd replied by saying, well, Mr. Lawless, you didn't put that into your notice of motion. you will need to go back out and put that request into a new notice of motion and file it again. However,
now, just to clarify here, at this point in time, you, Sean Lawless, bookmaker, out of business for the last 5 years, we're now without a solicitor. You're representing yourself, you're what's called a litigant in person or a lay litigant.
Yes.
So what you're saying is this is about form filling, you hadn't filled in the right form. Is that essentially or
yes.
the right way? You hadn't asked the right question. So Judge Spud said, you better go out and reframe your motion and come back again.
Yes.
Is that right?
But he added to that in his opinion, that SIS should provide this as a matter of courtesy to avoid any
more time wasting or
more
whatever.
time wasting.
Right, so he did make that advice to the other side?
Yes.
Okay. Right, so you left that court.
Left that court, and in the corridor of the court, the solicitor acting for SIS approached me and said...
Who was he now?
Niall Colfer, of Colfers and Company, said to me that SIS, it would cost SIS 400,000 to run this case in the High Court, and I was a man of straw.
He said to you, you were a man of straw.
He said to me, I was a man of straw. I remember saying to him, SIS made me a man of straw. I wasn't a man of straw before.
A man of straw meaning that, you know, if they spent 400,000 prosecuting this case, whether they won or lost, they'd never get anything off you because you're already cleaned out.
Yes.
Right.
I said no, I didn't want it. The matter was going to be prosecuted in the High Court.
Sorry, you want what?
I wasn't taking any... Oh, sorry. He offered me 300,000 to walk away.
So I want to capture this. They've offered you now, outside of the court, I presume your relationship with McCann Fitzgerald is finished, but you haven't given up. You've gone into court on your own, you've determined to prosecute this. Okay, you got it wrong, you filled in the wrong forms. The judge said come back again with the right form, but in the meantime, he recommended that they give you this information, which you were going to get anyway through discovery if you put in the proper form, you presumed. Outside the court, the solicitor says to you, look, it's going to cost us 400,000 to run this case, win, lose or draw. We'll never get the money back off you. So look, we'll offer you 300 grand if you walk away and settle now. Is that essentially what they offered you?
Yes.
Now, I want to put it to you, Sean, you've been out of business for 5 years, right? You were talking about the early 90s here at this point in time. You were being offered what it looks to me like a sum which would work out at 60,000 a year for the previous 5 years you were out of business, which presumably is more money than you would have pocketed if you'd stayed in business. Is that right?
It is.
Right, so this is a significant sum of money that if you'd walked away at this point in time, you would essentially have made a profit out of that. I'm not saying the personal experience, but you would not be at a loss. Is that right?
That is correct.
So did you accept that money?
No.
Why not?
I wanted an adjudication.
So you're stuck here again. Once again, here's this man who started this process back in 1994. We're now up in nearly the year 2000 at this point in time, and all he's saying, please sir, can I have an adjudication? That's really what you're asking.
Yes.
And you've turned down an offer at this stage already of 80,000,
yes,
excluding costs, through McCann Fitzgerald. You're now turning a serious offer here of 300,000 punts,
yes,
this is punts, not euro, punts, which would have worked out at 60,000 punts a year for the previous 5 years you've been out of business, which would, if you could have paid all your bills, go back and still had a profit and a fine holiday, and you turned us down because you wanted an adjudication.
Yes.
Okay, well that brings us to that point up to then, and that really is just the start of another quagmire of journeys that you went through, but we'll come back